Good morning, everybody. I'm not sure how loud I'm supposed to be. I'm going to try to talk to the back row. If I'm mumbling, raise your hand, and I'll try to be clearer. If I were to give my talk this morning a title, it would be Context. Context is everything. And so, if you heard me say this week that I wanted the Guardians to beat the Tigers, you might wonder, who are the Guardians? And who are these Tigers? And why do they want to beat them? And are these Tigers loose? Are they wandering around? If you didn't have the proper context, you wouldn't really know what I was talking about. But it is early October, and it is baseball playoff season. And unfortunately, the Cleveland Guardians lost to the Detroit Tigers. Maybe there's next year. So the Cambridge Dictionary describes context as the situation within which something exists or happens that can help explain it. So in the past few years, my understanding of the creation story has been really influenced and expanded by several sources. One of them is a book called The Universal Christ by Richard Rohr. It's a book that is just really, one of the chapters just heavily talks about creation and God's spirit, God's divine presence and involvement in it, and how it wasn't just then, in the beginning, that it was present, but even now. The other book was called Braiding Sweetgrass. And it's a book written by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and it's an indigenous perspective on the world and nature, also infused with scientific knowledge. It's an excellent read. You don't zip through it. You read it and you digest it. Another profound influence for me has been Tom Carr. His sermons and our private discussions have really been really important to me. So, how many times in your faith walk have you heard the creation story? Some of us, not me necessarily, but some have been fed this story from the moment you could sit upright in a chair in church school. It's a story of a loving, purposeful God. It's a story of progress. Chaos becomes order, giving birth to life. It's a story where each new day's creation springs forth from the previous day's work, all culminating in human beings made in the very image of the Creator themselves. And that themselves is a plural on purpose. And during the process, God saw what was created and said it was very good. This morning, I want us to consider the creation story from a different perspective, a different context, if you will. So imagine you're living 3,500 years ago, before the time the book of Genesis was even written down. Your life is lived close to the land. You survive each day by your toil. You gather food you cultivated, as well as food that you gathered as you went about your day. You organize together with other families in a community for protection and for mutual support. The entire community depends on each individual, and each individual depends on the community. From old to young, everyone has a part, a valuable part. You keep flocks and herds that both clothe and feed you. You protect them from predators because you know that without their life, your family and your community risk starving. You shelter from elements in primitive structures, maybe of stone or wood or animal skins as tents. You may be permanently settled in a single spot, or you may migrate with the herds. You value everything you have because you know the effort that was required to gain it. And you also know that if you lose it, it could cost you your life. There are no vacations and no days off. In the evening, as the sun disappears beneath the horizon and the moon and stars appear, you sit around a fire and eat your meager portions while you discuss your day and maybe set out a plan for tomorrow. You sit and retell stories that have been passed down to you from previous generations by word of mouth, stories that teach lessons that are critical for your survival, stories that fill your imagination with awe and inspiration, stories told by the old to the young. During the telling, you recount the story of creation, of the world and everything in it. You tell it to acknowledge a being, a creator that is greater than yourselves. You tell it to understand your place in the scheme of things, your context, if you will. Our lives today, some 35 centuries later, are a far cry from that time. Few of us in the first world would live close to the land. We gather our shrink-wrapped cardboard box processed foods from stores. We wear clothes produced in far-off countries. We are separated from the people and the effort required to produce what we eat and what we wear. Sometimes, the more things we have, the less we value them. In the first world, we live in artificial light and in temperature-controlled environments. Heat, cold, darkness have all been overcome with evolving modern technology. We seek comfortable surroundings, and we grumble if something doesn't go the way we want. It's too hot, it's too cold, the pews seem a little harder this morning. Our days are ruled by clocks and schedules without regard for the rhythms of the world around us. The need to live in community for survival has been nullified at the cost of close relationships with those who aren't part of our immediate family. Even families living under the same roof are separated by electronics. Filling our spare time with mindless games and distractions on our screens, I myself am a victim of Angry Birds too. Man, I'm just going to play for a moment. Yeah, and then an hour passes and I'm still pounding away. Do we know our neighbors? Do we acknowledge them with more than a wave or a nod of the head? Do we even make eye contact with them? Do we zealously guard our boundaries, both physical and emotional, to not get involved? All too easily, we are oblivious to the vulnerable people around us while we chase after our own pursuits. Too often, the oppressed, the sick, the weak, the poor, the orphans and widows are out of sight and out of mind. And this is not new to us. This has plagued human beings. It's spoken about throughout the Old Testament. Too easily, we lose our connection to the Creator and our place in the created world. We lost our context to this idea of the statement of fill the earth, subdue it, and have dominion over it. To me, that's a scary sentence. What do we think when we hear those words, dominion and subdue? Do we think force our own will? Do we mean dominate? Do we mean overpower? Seems that plays out quite often. Instead, we need to consider this alternative. If a loving God was the creator of all things and called them good, and if we were created in their image and given the responsibility to rule over creation, then why wouldn't our role be the same as the creators? To be caretakers, to be nurturers, to be stewards, to be creators. But that's not how it's played out in human history. We've ignored, when I say we, I'm talking the greater we of the world. Throughout history, we've ignored the creator of our role, and instead we've seen the creation as something to be exploited and used for our own gratification and greed. We see the world in terms of our limited lifespan rather than a continuous cycle that existed long before us and will exist long after us. With that limited mindset, we ignore the intent of the Creator, and it plays out in the impact of our actions. It's going to be a little dark here for a moment. Our own U.S. history is filled with the abuses of creation. We slaughtered 30 million buffalo, not for food, but in an attempt to force an indigenous population to become like us, indiscriminately. We've blown the tops off of mountains to strip mine for coal and sent the tailings into streams and rivers, polluting for generations. We've used our waterways as open sewers for our refuse without concern for those living downstream. I'm old enough to remember when the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland burned one summer because it was so fouled. We use toxic chemicals. This may hit home, and I'm sorry. We use toxic chemicals to kill weeds and insects in our lawns without even considering the impact of beneficial plants and animals. But we do put up little signs to say, stay off. So we have that. We spray chemicals on our food crops to increase production while destroying the microscopic life of the soil. We ignore the implications of climate change for the false promise of cheap gas and corporate greed, and maybe even a little boost to our retirement accounts. And that's just our abuse of nature. I told you it's dark, and I'm sorry. We'll get to our part. Our treatment of fellow human beings is often worse. For well over 200 years, we enslaved people. We bought and sold them as throwaway commodities. And even after emancipation, we treated them poorly with restrictive laws. And that has gone on, and that effect continues today. And slavery wasn't just a southern plantation thing. We in the North profited from slavery. Many of our families and institutions were made wealthy by that practice. Sexual predators today are protected by politicians, while the victims are denied justice. Innocent people are kidnapped off the streets by masked agents of the government and held without rights because they look a certain way. People are persecuted by a religious minority because who they love and who they identify as. Humans have become exploiters and ravagers rather than caretakers and stewards. We were intended to be those caretakers and stewards. There are many advantages to our modern world that people who lived even a couple of decades ago would trade for in a heartbeat. So, how do we live out the context that we were created for? Because we were created purposely in this time and in this place, and we have a role. I'm convinced that in our current situation, we should not only consider our role of stewards and caretakers of nature, but of all creation, of human beings, making it a better place for everyone today and for future generations. That's how we honor the caretakers of the past while paving the way for future generations. So I want to close that in order to carry out our role, in order to carry out the context of our creation, we can learn to live in cooperation with nature instead of destroying it. We can try to be less wasteful. Now I say that and I chuckle to myself because as I was preparing this, I prepare it by printing it out, 10 pages, single-sided. I mark it up, retype it, throw this away, and I repeat the process probably 20 times. We can consciously seek to value people over things. We can work to spread the seeds of kindness and hope to everyone around us in every interaction. You're in line at the store, you're at the gas pump, you're on the phone with DMV, be nice. They're human beings too. We can't let ourselves be overwhelmed and silenced by what's going on around us. By remembering that the divine presence of God that was present at creation lives in us. Galatians 5:22 tells us that we can be agents of good in every moment. The fruit of the Spirit, the fruit of the divine presence, is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against those things, there is no law. The fruit of the Spirit contains the seeds of stewardship and hope this world needs. We were created not to be passive spectators of the events around us. Instead, we were created to be activists in the world for the good of all creation, messengers of faith, of love, and of hope. Amen.